Welcome to this explainer, future educators. As you gear up for your TTC teaching practice, I know a lot of you are probably wondering how to avoid that boring, old chalk and talk routine we've all sat through. Well, today we're breaking down one of the absolutely most powerful tools in your pedagogical toolkit, the observation method. We're going to look at exactly how you can turn any standard run-of-the-mill lesson into a living, breathing classroom transaction.
Right off the bat, notice what isn't happening here. These students aren't staring blankly at a blackboard, right? And they definitely aren't just memorizing a textbook. The teacher is literally right there in the mud with them, guiding their focus toward the pond water and the plants. They're actively observing, understanding, and learning. This perfectly captures that crucial shift from passive listening to active, hands-on discovery. So, to make sure you're fully prepared for your practicums, we'll structure our training today across 5 crucial sections: Gateway to Knowledge, Objectives and Core Features, 6 Steps of Observation, Teacher and Student Roles, and finally, Realities, Merits and Demerits. Okay, let's start by building a strong conceptual foundation before we look at the practical steps. Section 1, Gateway to Knowledge, Defining the Observation Method. The biggest shift here is your role as the teacher. You are actively guiding your students to gain knowledge through direct perception. You aren't just, telling them to look at a leaf. You're helping them carefully decode an object, a changing process, or even a really complex social situation. Your job is not to spoon-feed them the answers. It's to guide their eyes so they discover those answers all by themselves. I want you to keep this really profound philosophy in mind. Observation is literally the gateway to knowledge. Before a child can analyze, synthesize, or evaluate anything, they first have to know how to truly see. And as a teacher, you are the one opening that gate. Let's move on to our specific pedagogical goals. Section 2, Objectives and Core Features, the why and the what. Our objectives with this method aim way, way beyond simple rote memorization. We are deliberately trying to improve their raw power of perception. Because, think about it. By training them to notice the tiny details that others usually miss, we arouse their natural curiosity. And that builds a lifelong habit of finding facts independently, which, if you think about it, is the absolute bedrock of a true scientific attitude. So this is a dramatic shift away from textbook-heavy learning. It places the student at the absolute center, and it relies entirely on first-hand experience. But I want you to pay special attention to the idea of careful and systematic observing. This isn't just letting a batch of students run wild outside. Not at all. It is a highly structured process that is tethered directly to real-life situations. Now, how do we actually do this in a real classroom? Section 3, 6 Steps of Observation, Executing the Live Transaction. You might be sitting there wondering how on earth to maintain discipline and focus during all these activities. And honestly, that is a super common fear for trainees stepping into a live classroom. But the answer is simple. You follow a precise sequence. Structure is exactly what separates a chaotic field trip from a true masterclass in observation. It all starts with meticulous preparation. Step 1, planning is entirely on you. You need to choose an event that perfectly matches your syllabus. Step 2 is the introduction. You have to frame the context so students know exactly why they're looking at, let's say, a sprouting seed. And then comes step 3, the observation itself, where you take a step back and the students take the spotlight. Once that observation wraps up, we move into synthesis. Step 4 is discussion. What patterns emerged from what everyone just saw? Step 5 takes all that raw data and distills it into a formal conclusion, where we draw broad generalizations. And finally, step 6 is application. How does understanding this concept apply to the real world? This continuous 6-step loop is the absolute engine of experiential learning. And the best part? You don't need a high-tech, expensive laboratory to do this. The everyday world literally becomes your classroom. You can guide them to systematically observe the structure of a simple potted plant, or watch insects right there in the schoolyard. You can analyze the flow of traffic outside the school gates to understand systems, or just have them observe the sunset to grasp planetary rotation. Ordinary events become truly unforgettable concepts. Let's look at who exactly does what during this live transaction. Section 4, Teacher and Student Roles, the Classroom Dynamic. Notice the extremely clear division of labor here. Your action verbs are to select, arrange, motivate, and evaluate. You're the director behind the scenes. The students' verbs are to observe, record, ask, and express. They are the active participants. Actually, it's kind of ironic, right? If you find yourself doing all the talking, much like I'm doing right now to explain this to you, you've slipped out of the observation method and right back into a lecture. So you have to train your students to follow this rigorous sequence. Yes, they need to know what to focus on, and they need to observe carefully. But steps 4, 5, and 6, that's where the real academic muscle is built. They must rigorously document what they see, mentally organize and classify all that raw data, and finally, find the confidence to articulate and report their empirical findings back to the class. As future master teachers, we also have to be completely realistic about the practical constraints you're going to face in typical Indian schools. Section 5, Realities, Merits and Demerits, the honest evaluation. Let's be totally impartial here. The merits are undeniable. It provides tangible, first-hand experience that vastly increases student interest and just cements lasting knowledge. But the demerits are very real constraints. It takes significantly more time than a standard lesson. It requires physical materials. And let's be honest, executing this effectively in a typical batch of 40 or 50 students can be incredibly difficult, not to mention the very real risk of students drawing the totally wrong conclusions from what they see.
But when you weigh those constraints against the outcomes, the results really speak for themselves. The deep comprehension of facts, the sudden massive spike in classroom engagement, the long-term memory retention, and the fostering of a self-learning mindset. I mean, these are transformational impacts that you simply cannot achieve through passive teaching. So, my dear trainees, the theory is clear, the exact steps are laid out for you, and the roles are defined. As you prepare to walk into your teaching practicum, I want to leave you with this final thought to ponder. How will you transform your next standard lesson into an unforgettable, systematic observation experience? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and best of luck opening those gateways of knowledge.